So, we've got everything glued together here. The scarf joint, you can see, it's all stuck. But now, just as if I have a 14-foot long block of foam, or plank, that I went to the store and bought instead of an 8-footer. Peel that tape off, and we're now ready to start laying out the boat. Now the next thing you have to decide on to make this is how wide do you want the hull? In my own experience, 28 to 30 inches wide is the best for the trade-off between stability and speed. So right here I have my latest, just a cheap seat from Ozark Trail. Got it at Walmart. Nice thing about it is this lower part of the seat, look underneath, has bungee cords. Gives you a little bit of suspension here to the way the seat feels when you sit on it. And it actually seems comfortable. And they have these in black and they have these in purple. And for some reason they decided the purple ones all needed to go. Like last week, I bought, I think, 20 of them for $6 a piece. I can't make a seat for $6, and I got these things for $6 a piece. This one was 10 or 15. That's the regular price. So this seat is 20 inches wide. I want a boat that is 28. Like I said, that's 28 to 30 inches. So that's the mark I'm going to make here for width of the bottom of the hull. So a 20-inch seat, that's the width of the bottom. We've got room for the seat, and we'll have about probably 2 inches on either side of that will be the thickness of the sidewalls. That will actually work well. So that's the first thing you have to decide is your width. The next thing you have to do is now you have to take half of that. So half of 28, sorry for those of you that work in centimeters, you're going to have to do your math differently. But half of 28 is 14. So I'm going to mark the width of the center line, 14 inches, right there. And again, at this end, which will be the bow end, or the stern end, doesn't really matter, 14 inches. And all the way at the other end of the boat, 14 inches again. This is so I can use the chalk line to snap a center line to make sure that I keep the boat symmetrical all the way through the build. The next part is to take the snap line, the chalk line I mean, not the snap line, you snap it. But it's a chalk line, and lay it over my mark all the way to the other end of the boat. Pull it tight, and I now have a center line all the way down my foam, which will now be what I determine that I have the same on the right side of the boat as I do on the left side of the boat for everything that I'm building. The next step is a layout step. This is just simply because I am designing this boat to be a tandem, meaning 2 paddlers. And when you figure paddlers, you need to know how long their legs are so that you can have them far enough apart so their knees aren't all crunched up when they're trying to paddle. And they're not knocking each other with the paddle by accident. That happens enough on a properly laid out boat. You don't want them too close together. So here I've got a 14-foot panel. I've now measured 7 feet. That's going to be the distance exactly in the middle between the bow and the stern. And then I'll figure the front paddler, about there. And I want to make sure that they have leg room, so including the seat. Let's see, I'm going to sit on it here and figure how long my legs would end up. Since I'm an average sized guy. Yeah, 4 feet is probably from the back of my seat, which is just about the 7. That's how much room I want to give people. That way if a little bit taller person is in here, they have room for their feet. And I'm not going to be crunched up if I'm in here paddling. So this will be good. Alright, so take that. So that's good. Now we get into, I want 4 feet behind that mark. This is where I've got to play with the sides of the boat maybe to make sure I get the width that I need. So let's go 4 feet from that 7-foot mark. The rear paddler has got to be here, essentially. They'll probably be bumping the front paddler in the back with their toes. That's good, right there. Now we have, that's an 8-foot cockpit. That's what we want. The thing we have to make sure is this seat can go all the way in the back of the cockpit. So here is the back. I just marked right here where the back of my cockpit is, and I have to make sure that a 20-inch wide seat will fit here. So the bottom of the boat has to be 24 inches wide here to figure for the sidewalls. So my rear taper is going to be a little more abrupt than I normally do, but these are the design things you have to think about in creating a kayak. Now the front will be nice and smooth. The back, it's going to very slightly curve in to reach the center line in the back, but it will work, and as long as it isn't like a sharp angle right here on this corner, if it's a curve, water will follow it. But if you give water an angle like that, it'll just create an eddy, and that's going to slow you down. Just things to think about in laying out a boat. Normally for a single person boat, it's not even something you'd have to think about. Normally if you're planning to just bring a kid with you, there's stadium seats that are narrower than that. They work perfectly fine for a kid. This is just being based around the seats that I plan on using in this boat. Now we come to you with a few boating terms from actual boat building. If you ever heard this statement, somebody has their ducks in a row, now you understand what that means. Think of those bricks. Now boat designers will tend to have these nice lead or cast iron weights with a little handle on top, and it can sort of look like a duck with its head bent back over its back. And when you put them in a row, you're lining them up and you're flexing something flexible. Now in this case I use 3/4 inch PVC pipe, which works perfectly fine. A real boat builder would use something called a batten, which is a thin strip of flexible wood, and they would line up their ducks and then trace that curve, and that would be their shape. So this shape, I'm showing you how to lay it out, and probably not gonna have too much flair, but just give you an idea of what's going in here to make a nice straight, nice gentle curve without odd blockiness to it or anything like that. So the first thing is I want this end to be 2 inches wide. You always want 2 inches with foam, because if you make a sharp point with foam, it's just going to dent and crease and look hideous. Whereas if you keep it at 2 inches, and which it'll be 1 inch on either side. So we get this lined up here. We have our 2 inches. I want this pipe right there on the outside edge of that. Put my ducks here to hold it in place. Go back here to the middle of the boat. Remember we 7-foot line, and at 7 feet, I want this 14, and I want this full width at 28, right here at the center of the boat. So mark that there. This is where you're going to start making it curve, because I want that to reach the mark. Let's bring the camera over so you can see what I mean by meeting the mark that I made. So that right there is the mark that when I trace along this like this, I want my pencil, pen, marker, whatever I use to just come over that. Now, if you're looking, you also see I have another one back here. And this is where I want the hull to line up here, but I want it still pushed out enough there. So that will require me to move that forward, the brick that's in the middle of the pipe. I'll have to push that out just a little bit here. I'll bring it back as well to line up the way I want it. Still have this coming in at 2 inches. This 28. And this is a 10-foot pipe. I'm making a 14-foot boat. So of course it's not going the full length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the front. There's everything from here forward. On the foam. Trace that to show my bottom of my hull the way I want it. Nice thing about foam is if you do mess up, you can just glue a little on and shape it down again the way you want. So I've done this for one side. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side to make a mirror image of it. Laying this one out, you have a little bit of a different challenge because this side over here is going right off the edge of your foam piece. So it doesn't matter. The thing that matters is this 7-foot length that I decided on where I want it to be full width. Bring that across. Right here, I have to make sure that these bricks cause the pipe to meet the line here and here, just the, so it just crosses right there. And then I have the same thing here. I got to set this so my 2-inch mark is right where that pipe runs off the edge. And you usually got to play with it a little, just practice so you know your pencil is hitting it just right. But now I like the way that looks. So there will be my cut line for the bottom. And I just want to make sure that I got this traced. So I'm following this curve. There's nothing worse than when you're at the point when you have the saw going and you come to a point and the line kind of stops and you got to kind of go, how far over do I go here? It's much better to draw it out ahead of time. And then we'll go to the stern. This is where that curve is going to be a little nice, instead of a nice long gentle one like we have on the front here. It's going to be a little bit more abrupt because of the way I'm placing that rear seat just a few feet from the back of the boat. So once again, I measure 1 inch to either side of the very stern of the boat where the center line touches the foam. I used to say make it 4 inches, but I'm trying for a little bit more streamlined here. So that's where I want the batten, the pipe, to cross this line where the back of the foam is, so it matches up with that mark. Now I showed you before, we have the issue with this, this is the width that it needs to be in order to make it around the back of the seat so that the person in back can be all the way back. So this is where you gotta kind of really flex it. And I want to make sure I get my width up here in the middle where I want it. So as you can see, this curve is going to be a little bit more abrupt on the stern end, but with water it will follow a curve. You just can't give it a sharp angle. That's what it doesn't like. So alright, we get that. We picked up our seat mark that we need. We've got our 2-inch, yep, there's our 2-inch mark right there for the stern. There we go, 2-inch, come down, follow along, pick up our back corner of the cockpit dimension that we have to have. We got our sidewall dimension right here, and just trace along here, and that defines one side of the boat. Now I'm just going to copy it on the other side, and I'll be done with this step. So as you can see, I've added another pile of bricks here just to bring this right where I want it. Follow that down so it gets to the point it runs into the edge. And then this is my corner. This is where the rear bulkhead is going to, or at least possibly will be. And, or at least that's as far as the aft seat will be able to go back. Let's put it that way. Pick up our 2-inch width at the very point of the stern. And there we go. We have now traced out the shape of the hull. The next thing will be a dimensional check to make sure it's symmetrical.